The brain is like a muscle. When it is in use, we feel very good. Understanding is joyous. Carl Sagan. What if I told you that right now, as you listen to this, your memory palace, that magnificent mental library you've spent decades building, is quietly crumbling? That the creativity you once took for granted is slowly suffocating? That your brain chemistry is shifting in ways that make learning feel impossible and growth seem like a distant memory? In part 1 of this series, we uncovered the devastating truth about what happens when your brain stops learning. We saw how cognitive decline spreads like wildfire through your mind, how it accelerates aging, damages your emotional health, weakens your body, and isolates you from meaningful relationships. But today, we're going deeper into the most shocking part of this story. Today, we're entering the final stages of cognitive decline, and then, we're discovering how to reverse it all. Welcome back to the book Psych. This is part 2 of What Happens When You Stop Learning, the hidden brain science that's destroying your mind. Chapter 8. The Memory Palace Crumbles, How Learning Affects Memory. The real art of memory is the art of attention. William James. In the summer of 1995, a London taxi driver named Derek sat in a neuroimaging lab, his head surrounded by the whirring machinery of an MRI scanner. Derek had been driving London's labyrinthine streets for over 2 decades, his brain containing an intricate mental map of every road, shortcut, and landmark in the city. What researchers discovered about Derek's brain that day would revolutionize our understanding of how learning shapes memory, and what happens when that learning stops. Derek's hippocampus, the brain's primary memory center, was significantly larger than average. Years of navigating London's complex street network had literally grown new brain tissue. But here's what makes Derek's story particularly relevant to our discussion. When researchers followed up with him years later, after GPS technology had largely eliminated the need for his mental mapping skills, they found something troubling. Derek's hippocampus had begun to shrink back toward normal size, and with it, his remarkable navigational abilities were fading. Derek's story is a microcosm of what happens to all of us when we stop learning. Memory isn't a static filing cabinet in your brain. It's a dynamic, living system that grows stronger with use and weaker with neglect. When learning stops, your memory palace doesn't just stop expanding, it begins to crumble, taking with it not just your ability to form new memories, but potentially your access to memories you've already formed. The architecture of memory, your brain's most complex construction. To understand how learning affects memory, we need to first appreciate the incredible complexity of your brain's memory systems. Memory isn't a single function, it's more like a vast metropolitan city with different districts, each specialized for different types of information and all interconnected by intricate neural highways. At the heart of this city lies the hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure buried deep in your temporal lobe. The name comes from the Greek words, hippos, meaning horse, and kompos, meaning sea monster, an apt description for this mysterious and vital brain region that serves as the central hub of your memory network. The hippocampus functions like a master librarian, deciding which experiences are worth preserving as long-term memories and orchestrating the complex process of memory formation. But it doesn't work alone. Connected to the hippocampus are numerous other brain regions, each contributing different elements to the memory-making process. The prefrontal cortex serves as memory's executive assistant, helping to organize, categorize, and retrieve memories when needed. The amygdala acts as an emotional stamp, marking memories with emotional significance that helps determine their importance and accessibility. The various cortical regions, visual, auditory, somatosensory, store the sensory details that give memories their rich, multidimensional quality. What's remarkable about this memory network is that it's in constant flux. Memory consolidation is a process that converts temporary memories into long-lasting ones, with information initially stored in the hippocampus gradually transferred to the neocortex for long-term storage. This isn't a one-time transfer, but an ongoing process that can continue for months or even years after an initial experience. Think of memory formation like building a house. The hippocampus is like the construction foreman, coordinating all the different workers and materials. But once the house is built, It needs ongoing maintenance, renovation, and sometimes reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you're not just accessing a static file. You're rebuilding that memory, potentially changing it in the process. This dynamic nature of memory is both its greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability. The same plasticity that allows memories to be strengthened, enriched, and integrated with new learning also makes them susceptible to decay when the neural networks supporting them aren't regularly maintained through continued learning. The learning-memory symbiosis. Why they need each other. Learning and memory exist in a symbiotic relationship, each one feeding and strengthening the other. Learning creates new memories, but memory also enables learning by providing the foundation upon which new knowledge can be built. When you learn something new, your brain doesn't just create an isolated memory of that information. Instead, it weaves that new knowledge into your existing network of memories, creating connections, associations, and relationships that enrich both the new learning and your previous memories. This process is called elaborative encoding, and it's one of the most powerful mechanisms your brain uses to create lasting memories. When you learn about photosynthesis, for example, your brain doesn't just store facts about chlorophyll and sunlight. It connects this new information to your memories of green plants, sunny days, the smell of grass, your elementary school science class, and countless other related experiences and knowledge. These connections serve multiple purposes. They make the new information easier to remember by giving it multiple retrieval pathways. If you can't remember photosynthesis directly, you might access it through your memory of plant colors or childhood science experiments. They also enrich your existing memories, adding new layers of meaning and understanding to previously stored experiences. But here's the crucial insight. This elaborative encoding process requires active learning. When you stop learning new information, you stop creating these enriching connections. Your existing memories become increasingly isolated, making them both harder to access and less meaningful. It's like having a library where you stop adding new books. Not only do you miss out on new knowledge, but the existing books become less valuable because you can't make connections between old knowledge and new insights. Over time, the entire library begins to feel stale and irrelevant. Dr. Lynn Nadel, a neuroscientist at the University of Arizona who has spent decades studying memory systems, explains it this way. Memory is not about the past. It's about using the past to navigate the future. When learning stops, memory loses its forward-looking function and becomes merely backward-looking nostalgia. The consolidation crisis. When memory processing breaks down, one of the most critical aspects of memory formation is a process called consolidation, the complex biological process by which temporary memories become permanent. This process involves hippocampal replay during rest and sleep, where activity patterns associated with memory formation are replayed offline to strengthen and stabilize memories. Think of consolidation like developing a photograph in a darkroom. The initial experience is like taking the picture. You've captured the image, but it's not yet permanent. Consolidation is the development process that makes the image stable and lasting. Without proper consolidation, memories fade like undeveloped photographs exposed to light. This consolidation process requires several things to work effectively: adequate sleep, periods of rest and reflection, and most importantly, the continued activation of memory networks through ongoing learning and mental stimulation. When learning stops, consolidation becomes less efficient. The neural networks involved in memory processing become less active, making it harder for your brain to properly develop and store new memories. Even more troubling, existing memories that haven't been fully consolidated may begin to fade or become distorted. This is why people who stop learning often report that their memory isn't what it used to be. It's not just that they're having trouble forming new memories, their brain's ability to maintain and strengthen existing memories is also compromised. Recent research has revealed something particularly concerning about this consolidation crisis. Studies show that memory consolidation involves the gradual transfer of information from the hippocampus to other brain regions, but this process can be disrupted when the supporting neural networks become less active. The retrieval revolution. How access to memory changes. Memory formation is only half the story. The other half is retrieval. your ability to access stored memories when you need them. And retrieval, it turns out, is profoundly affected by continued learning. When you're actively learning, your brain maintains what researchers call retrieval flexibility. This is your ability to access memories through multiple pathways, to make unexpected connections between different pieces of information, and to reconstruct memories even when direct access pathways might be blocked. Think about how you remember someone's name. If you're actively learning and your memory networks are flexible, you might access that name through multiple routes: their appearance, where you met them, what they do for work, mutual friends you have in common, or even completely arbitrary associations like the fact that their name rhymes with your favorite song. But when learning stops and neural flexibility decreases, retrieval becomes more rigid. You become dependent on fewer, more direct pathways to access memories. This makes your memory system more fragile. If one pathway becomes damaged or blocked, you might lose access to memories that are actually still intact. This explains why people who stop learning often experience what feels like sudden memory loss. The memories aren't necessarily gone. They're just less accessible because the retrieval pathways have become narrow and inflexible. Dr. Endel Tulving, one of the pioneers of memory research, discovered that memory retrieval is actually a reconstructive process. Every time you remember something, you're not just accessing a stored file, you're actively rebuilding that memory based on available cues and your current knowledge state. This reconstructive nature of memory means that continued learning doesn't just help you form new memories, it actually helps you maintain and improve access to old memories by providing new contexts and associations through which they can be reconstructed. The specificity spiral. When memories lose their detail, one of the most heartbreaking aspects of memory decline is the loss of what psychologists call episodic specificity, the rich, detailed, personally meaningful memories that make up the story of your life. When you're actively learning, your brain is skilled at encoding specific details: the smell of the air on a particular morning, the exact expression on someone's face, the precise words used in an important conversation. These specific details are what make memories vivid, meaningful, and personally significant. But maintaining this level of specificity requires cognitive resources and neural flexibility. The brain systems responsible for detailed encoding, particularly the hippocampus and its connections to various sensory cortices, need to be regularly exercised through the formation of new, complex memories. When learning stops, memory formation becomes less sophisticated. New experiences are encoded in broad, general terms rather than rich, specific details. You might remember that you had dinner with friends, but not the specific conversations, emotions, or sensory experiences that made that evening unique. Even more concerning, this loss of encoding sophistication can affect your existing memories. When you recall old memories, you reconstruct them using your current cognitive capabilities. If those capabilities have diminished due to lack of learning, your reconstructed memories become less detailed and less vivid over time. This creates what researchers call a specificity spiral. As new memories become less detailed, they provide fewer rich cues for retrieving old memories. As old memories are reconstructed with diminished cognitive resources, they lose their detail and emotional richness. Over time, your entire life story begins to feel vague, generic, and emotionally flat. Dr. Daniel Schachter of Harvard University has extensively studied this phenomenon. His research shows that people who continue learning throughout their lives maintain much richer, more detailed autobiographical memories than those who become cognitively stagnant. The difference isn't just in memory formation, it's in the entire subjective experience of having a coherent, meaningful life story. The pattern recognition paradox. When experience becomes a prison, one of the most insidious effects of cognitive stagnation on memory is what researchers call the pattern recognition paradox. As people stop learning, they become increasingly dependent on familiar patterns and schemas to interpret and remember new experiences. Pattern recognition is normally one of the brain's greatest strengths. Your ability to quickly categorize experiences, recognize familiar situations, and apply past learning to new contexts is crucial for efficient cognitive functioning. When you walk into a restaurant, your brain instantly activates restaurant schemas that help you know how to behave, what to expect, and how to interpret the social situation. But when learning stops, pattern recognition can become a cognitive prison. Without the flexibility that comes from regularly encountering genuinely new information, your brain becomes increasingly rigid in how it categorizes and interprets experiences. This rigidity affects memory in several ways. First, truly novel experiences become harder to encode because they don't fit into existing patterns. Your brain, lacking the flexibility to create new categories, either dismisses these experiences as unimportant or forces them into inappropriate existing schemas. Second, your memory for routine experiences becomes increasingly generic. When every restaurant visit, every social interaction, every workday gets processed through the same rigid patterns, individual experiences lose their distinctiveness. You end up with memory for the pattern rather than memory for specific events. Finally, this pattern rigidity can distort memory retrieval. When you recall past experiences, you unconsciously fill in details based on your current schemas rather than actual memory traces. Over time, your memories become less about what actually happened and more about what typically happens in similar situations. This is why people who stop learning often report that their memories feel repetitive and indistinct. It's not just that they're having fewer memorable experiences, it's that their brain's ability to encode and retrieve distinctive memories has been compromised by excessive reliance on rigid patterns. The emotional memory erosion. When feelings fade, memory isn't just about facts and events, it's also about emotions. The emotional content of memories is what makes them personally meaningful, motivating, and transformative. When learning stops, one of the most profound changes is in how emotions are encoded, stored, and retrieved from memory. The amygdala, your brain's emotional processing center, works closely with the hippocampus to create emotionally rich memories. When you experience something emotionally significant, the amygdala releases norepinephrine and other neurochemicals that enhance memory consolidation, making emotional memories particularly vivid and long-lasting. But this emotional memory system depends on continued stimulation and challenge to maintain its sensitivity. When learning stops and you have fewer novel, challenging experiences, your amygdala becomes less active. This decreased activity affects both the formation of new emotional memories and the maintenance of existing ones. People who stop learning often report that their memories feel emotionally flat. Past experiences that were once vivid and meaningful begin to feel distant and colorless. This isn't just normal aging, it's the result of an emotional memory system that has become understimulated and less responsive. Even more concerning, this emotional flattening can affect your sense of identity and life meaning. Your personal identity is largely constructed from emotionally significant memories, the experiences that shaped you, the relationships that mattered, the achievements that defined you. When these memories lose their emotional richness, your sense of self can become less vivid and compelling. Dr. Antonio Damasio's groundbreaking research on emotion and memory has shown that emotional content isn't just added to memories, it's integral to how memories are formed, stored, and retrieved. When the emotional memory system becomes less active due to cognitive stagnation, the entire architecture of personal memory begins to change. The metamemory meltdown, when you lose track of what you know. Beyond affecting the memories themselves, stopping learning also affects what psychologists call metamemory, your awareness of your own memory processes. Metamemory includes your sense of what you do and don't know, your confidence in your memories, your ability to monitor your own learning, and your understanding of how your memory system works. When you're actively learning, you're constantly getting feedback about your memory performance. You discover what kinds of information you remember easily and what requires more effort. You learn to recognize when you truly understand something versus when you're just familiar with it. You develop strategies for encoding information more effectively and retrieving it when needed. This metamemory awareness is crucial for effective cognitive functioning. It helps you make decisions about when to trust your memory versus when to look something up. It guides your learning strategies, helping you focus effort where it's most needed. Most importantly, it allows you to compensate for memory limitations through external aids and strategic approaches. But when learning stops, metamemory awareness often deteriorates. Without regular challenges to your memory system, you lose touch with its current capabilities. You might overestimate your memory abilities, leading to frustrating situations where you thought you'd remember something but didn't. Alternatively, you might underestimate your memory, becoming overly dependent on external aids and further weakening your natural memory abilities. This metamemory meltdown creates a vicious cycle. Poor metamemory awareness leads to ineffective memory strategies, which leads to memory failures, which further undermines confidence and awareness. Over time, people can lose not just their memory abilities, but their understanding of how memory works and how to use it effectively. Research by Dr. John Dunlosky and his colleagues has shown that people with good metamemory skills continue to learn effectively throughout their lives, while those with poor metamemory awareness often struggle even when their basic memory abilities remain intact. The difference isn't in memory capacity, it's in memory wisdom. The social memory disruption. When shared memories fracture, memory isn't just an individual phenomenon, it's also deeply social. Much of what we remember is shaped by our interactions with others. We remember experiences differently when we can discuss them with people who were there. We maintain memories more effectively when they're part of ongoing social narratives. We even form memories collaboratively, with different people contributing different pieces of shared experiences. This social dimension of memory is profoundly affected when learning stops. People who become cognitively stagnant often withdraw from the kinds of rich social interactions that help maintain and enrich memory. They become less interested in discussing past experiences, less curious about other people's perspectives on shared events, and less likely to engage in the collaborative meaning-making that keeps social memories alive. This social memory disruption has several consequences. First, shared memories with family and friends can become distorted or fade entirely when they're not regularly reinforced through social interaction. Second, the process of creating new shared memories becomes less effective when one person isn't fully cognitively engaged. Third, the rich, multi-perspective understanding that comes from social memory construction is lost. Dr. Diana Tamir's research at Princeton University has shown that discussing memories with others actually changes how those memories are stored and retrieved. When people regularly engage in rich social conversations about their experiences, their memories become more detailed, more accurate, and more emotionally rich. When this social memory process breaks down due to cognitive withdrawal, memories become more isolated and less vivid. This is particularly tragic in family contexts, where shared memories form the foundation of family identity and connection. When a family member stops learning and becomes less engaged, the entire family's collective memory can be affected. The future memory crisis. When you can't imagine tomorrow. Perhaps the most profound effect of cognitive stagnation on memory is its impact on what psychologists call prospective memory, your ability to remember to do things in the future. But even more fundamentally, it affects episodic future thinking, your ability to imagine and mentally experience future scenarios. Your brain uses many of the same neural networks for remembering the past and imagining the future. The hippocampus, which is crucial for episodic memory, is equally important for constructing detailed, realistic simulations of future experiences. When learning stops and these networks become less active, both past memory and future imagination suffer together. This creates what researchers call a future memory crisis. People who stop learning often report difficulty planning ahead, trouble imagining how future experiences might unfold, and reduced motivation for future goals. This isn't just about memory for appointments and tasks. It's about the fundamental human ability to use imagination to guide decision-making and create meaning. Dr. Daniel Schachter's research has revealed that people with rich, detailed memories of the past are better at imagining specific, realistic future scenarios. Conversely, when memory becomes vague and generic, future thinking becomes equally impoverished. People lose the ability to mentally time travel into future experiences, making it harder to make good decisions and stay motivated toward long-term goals. This future memory crisis can have devastating effects on life satisfaction and achievement. When you can't vividly imagine future possibilities, you lose much of your motivation to work toward them. When you can't mentally rehearse future challenges, you're less prepared to handle them effectively. When you can't envision the long-term consequences of your actions, your decision-making becomes increasingly short-sighted. The wisdom paradox. When experience doesn't lead to understanding, common wisdom suggests that as we accumulate more life experiences, we should become wiser. But research reveals a troubling paradox. Experience alone doesn't automatically lead to wisdom. In fact, when learning stops, accumulated experiences can actually interfere with wise judgment. Wisdom involves the ability to integrate diverse experiences, recognize patterns across different domains, understand the limits of your knowledge, and apply appropriate judgment in complex situations. This requires ongoing cognitive flexibility, continued learning, and the ability to update your understanding based on new information. When learning stops, experience can become a cognitive burden rather than an asset. Past experiences get locked into rigid schemas that resist updating. New situations are inappropriately filtered through old patterns. The nuanced, contextual thinking that characterizes wisdom gives way to oversimplified generalizations based on limited past experience. This is why some people seem to become wiser with age while others become more rigid and close-minded. The difference isn't in the amount of experience they've accumulated, it's in whether they've continued learning and integrating new perspectives throughout their lives. Dr. Dilip Jest's research on wisdom and aging has shown that wise judgment requires several cognitive abilities: cognitive flexibility, perspective taking, emotional regulation, and pragmatic knowledge. All of these abilities are enhanced by continued learning and diminished by cognitive stagnation. The tragedy is that this wisdom paradox often becomes self-reinforcing. As people become more rigid in their thinking, they become less open to feedback and new information that might help them develop better judgment. Their accumulated experience becomes a prison rather than a foundation for growth. The nostalgia trap. When memory becomes backward-looking, one of the most noticeable changes in people who stop learning is an increased focus on nostalgia, a tendency to dwell on idealized memories of the past rather than engaging with present realities or future possibilities. While some nostalgia is normal and healthy, excessive backward-looking thinking can indicate that memory systems have become disconnected from ongoing learning and growth. When learning stops, new experiences become less meaningful and memorable. This creates a relative imbalance where past memories, particularly those from periods of active learning and growth, seem more vivid and significant than current experiences. The natural result is increased nostalgia and a sense that the best times are behind me. This nostalgia trap has several negative consequences. First, it reduces motivation to create new, meaningful experiences. Why invest effort in the present when the past seems so much richer? Second, it can lead to distorted memories where past experiences are idealized beyond their actual reality. Third, it can create depression and dissatisfaction with current life circumstances. Most importantly, excessive nostalgia can become a substitute for continued growth and learning. Instead of working to make current experiences more meaningful and memorable, people retreat into romanticized memories of past achievements and relationships. Dr. Konstantin Sedikady's research on nostalgia has shown that healthy nostalgia serves important psychological functions. It enhances mood, increases social connection, and provides continuity of identity. But when nostalgia becomes excessive due to cognitive stagnation, it can interfere with present-focused attention and future-oriented planning. The key distinction is between nostalgia that enriches your current experience and nostalgia that replaces it. When you're actively learning and growing, memories of the past can provide inspiration, wisdom, and emotional resources for current challenges. When learning stops, memories become a refuge from an increasingly bland and meaningless present. The memory recovery. How learning rebuilds your palace. The encouraging news is that memory systems retain remarkable plasticity throughout life. Studies have shown that when people re-engage with learning after periods of cognitive stagnation, memory abilities can recover dramatically, sometimes beyond their previous levels. When learning resumes, several positive changes occur in memory systems. First, the hippocampus begins to generate new neurons through a process called neurogenesis. While this process slows with age, It continues throughout life and is enhanced by learning, exercise, and novel experiences. Second, synaptic connections throughout memory networks become stronger and more numerous. This increases both the capacity for new learning and the accessibility of existing memories. Third, the executive control systems that manage memory encoding and retrieval become more efficient and flexible. Perhaps most importantly, active learning restores the forward-looking function of memory. Instead of being trapped in backward-looking nostalgia, memory again becomes a tool for navigating future challenges and opportunities. Dr. Michael Merzenek's research on brain plasticity has demonstrated that targeted cognitive training can restore memory abilities even in people who have experienced significant decline. The key is providing the right kind of challenging, progressive learning experiences that engage multiple memory systems simultaneously. The choice to remember your memory's future. As we conclude this exploration of how learning affects memory, it's crucial to understand that memory decline isn't an inevitable part of aging. It's largely the result of choices about continued learning and cognitive engagement. Your memory palace is always under construction. Every new learning experience adds rooms, strengthens foundations, and creates new pathways between different areas. When learning stops, construction halts, and the palace begins to crumble from neglect. But you have the power to resume construction at any time. Whether you're 25 or 85, your brain retains the capacity to build new memories, strengthen existing ones, and create the rich, interconnected network of experiences that gives life meaning and continuity. The choice is stark but simple: continue learning and watch your memory palace grow ever more magnificent, or stop learning and watch it slowly crumble into ruins. The architecture of your inner life, the rich storehouse of experiences, knowledge, and wisdom that makes you uniquely you, depends entirely on this choice. Remember, your memories aren't just records of the past, they're the foundation upon which your future is built. Choose to keep learning, and you choose to keep building that foundation stronger and more beautiful with each passing day. The alternative is to watch your life story fade into vague, colorless fragments of what once was a vivid, meaningful narrative. Your memory palace awaits your decision. What will you choose to build today? Chapter 9. The Creativity Catastrophe: How Learning Fuels Innovation. Creativity is intelligence having fun. Albert Einstein. In 1968, Dr. George Land administered a creativity test to 1,605-year-old children. The results were astounding. 98% of these young minds scored at the creative genius level. Curious about how creativity developed over time, Land repeated the same test with the same children when they turned 10 years old. The results were shocking. Only 30% still scored at the creative genius level. At 15 years old, the number had plummeted to just 12%. But the most devastating finding came when Land administered the same test to 280,000 adults. Only 2% scored at the creative genius level. What happened to our creativity? Where did that remarkable innovative capacity go? Land's research suggests a troubling truth. We don't lose our creativity through aging. We lose it through education systems and social structures that prioritize conformity over curiosity, routine over exploration, and convergent thinking over divergent possibilities. But there's another, even more insidious factor at play. As people transition from formal education into adult life, many stop learning entirely. They settle into comfortable routines, stop challenging themselves with new information, and gradually lose the cognitive flexibility that creativity requires. What follows is what we might call a creativity catastrophe, the systematic shutdown of one of humanity's most precious cognitive abilities. This catastrophe isn't just about losing the ability to paint pretty pictures or write poetry. Creativity is the engine of human progress, the source of innovation, the foundation of problem solving, and the key to psychological well-being and life satisfaction. When creativity dies, part of what makes us human dies with it. The neuroscience of creativity, your brain's innovation network. To understand how learning affects creativity, we first need to explore what creativity actually is at the neurological level. Contrary to popular belief, creativity isn't located in any single brain region. Instead, it emerges from the dynamic interaction of multiple neural networks working in concert. At the heart of creative thinking lies what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that become active during rest, daydreaming, and mind wandering. This network includes the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, among others. Think of the default mode network as your brain's internal playground, where ideas can combine in unexpected ways without the constraints of focused, goal-directed thinking. But creativity requires more than just free-floating ideas. It also needs the executive attention network, centered in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which provides the cognitive control necessary to evaluate, refine, and implement creative insights. This network acts like a skilled editor, helping to separate genuinely useful innovations from random mental noise. Finally, creativity depends on the salience network, which includes the anterior insula and dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. This network serves as a switch, determining when to engage in focused attention and when to allow the mind to wander freely. It's the neural mechanism that allows you to shift between concentrated work and creative exploration. What's remarkable about this creativity network is that it's highly dependent on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and reorganize existing pathways. Every time you learn something new, you're not just acquiring information, you're creating new potential connections between different ideas, concepts, and domains of knowledge. Dr. Arne Dietrich, a neuroscientist who has extensively studied the neural basis of creativity, describes it this way. Creativity is fundamentally about making new connections between previously unconnected ideas. The more diverse your knowledge base, and the more flexible your neural networks, the more potential connections you can make. This is why learning is so crucial for creativity. Each new piece of information you acquire becomes a potential component in future creative combinations. Each new skill you develop becomes a tool that can be applied in unexpected contexts. Each new perspective you encounter becomes a lens through which you can view old problems in new ways. The combinatorial engine, how diverse learning fuels innovation. Creativity is fundamentally a combinatorial process. Arthur Koestler, in his groundbreaking work, The Act of Creation, described creative insight as bisociation, the creative act of connecting previously unconnected matrices of thought. This process requires a rich database of diverse experiences, knowledge, and skills to draw from. When you're actively learning across multiple domains, your brain builds what researchers call conceptual blending abilities. This is your capacity to take ideas from one field and apply them in completely different contexts. The history of innovation is filled with examples of this cross-domain creativity. Velcro was inspired by studying how burr seeds stick to animal fur. The structure of benzene was discovered through a dream about a snake eating its own tail, and Steve Jobs revolutionized computing by applying principles of typography and calligraphy to digital interfaces. But this combinatorial creativity requires cognitive flexibility and a broad knowledge base. When learning stops, several things happen that shut down this creative engine. First, your knowledge base stops expanding, limiting the raw materials available for creative combination. Second, your cognitive flexibility decreases, making it harder to see connections between different domains. Third, your willingness to explore unfamiliar territory diminishes, reducing the likelihood of encountering the unexpected insights that fuel breakthrough thinking. Research by Dr. Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School has shown that creative insights often emerge at the intersection of different knowledge domains. People who maintain active learning across multiple fields are significantly more likely to generate innovative solutions than those who specialize narrowly or stop learning entirely. This is why many of history's greatest innovators were polymaths, people who pursued learning across multiple disciplines. Leonardo da Vinci combined art, engineering, anatomy, and natural philosophy. Charles Darwin integrated geology, biology, economics, and philosophy. Marie Curie bridged physics, chemistry, and medicine. Their creativity emerged not despite their diverse interests, but because of them. The novelty imperative. Why your brain craves new experiences. Your brain has evolved to be remarkably sensitive to novelty. When you encounter something genuinely new, neural systems throughout your brain activate. Dopamine neurons fire, attention systems engage, and memory consolidation processes strengthen. This novelty response isn't just about curiosity, it's about survival and adaptation in a changing world. But novelty also serves a crucial function in creativity. Exposure to new experiences, ideas, and perspectives keeps your neural networks flexible and your thinking patterns from becoming rigid. It's like cross-training for your brain, engaging different cognitive muscles and preventing the mental equivalent of repetitive stress injury. When learning stops, novelty exposure decreases dramatically. People settle into comfortable routines, consume familiar media, interact with similar people, and avoid challenging experiences. While this might feel comfortable in the short term, it has devastating long-term effects on creative capacity. Dr. Shelley Carson's research at Harvard University has identified what she calls cognitive disinhibition as a key component of creative thinking. This is your brain's ability to pay attention to seemingly irrelevant information, to consider unusual possibilities, and to resist the automatic filtering that normally helps you focus on goal-relevant information. This cognitive disinhibition requires practice and stimulation to maintain. When you regularly expose yourself to novel experiences through continued learning, you keep these creative attention systems active and responsive. When learning stops, these systems become less sensitive, making it harder to notice the unexpected connections and possibilities that fuel creative insight. The tragedy is that this novelty sensitivity operates on a use it or lose it principle. The longer you go without seeking genuinely new experiences, the less sensitive your brain becomes to novelty, and the less motivated you become to seek it out. This creates a vicious cycle where creativity decline accelerates over time. The pattern-breaking paradox. When expertise becomes a prison. One of the most paradoxical aspects of creativity is its relationship to expertise. On one hand, creative breakthroughs often require deep knowledge and skill in a particular domain. You can't revolutionize physics without understanding existing physical principles, or create groundbreaking music without mastering musical fundamentals. But expertise can also become a creative prison. When you become highly skilled in a particular area, you develop what psychologists call expert schemas, sophisticated mental models that allow you to quickly recognize patterns and apply established solutions. These schemas are incredibly useful for routine problem solving, but they can interfere with creative thinking by making it harder to see beyond conventional approaches. This is where continued learning becomes crucial, even for experts. When you regularly expose yourself to new information and perspectives, you prevent your expertise from calcifying into rigid thinking patterns. You maintain cognitive flexibility and the ability to question assumptions that others in your field might take for granted. Dr. Dean Keith Simonton's research on creative expertise has shown that the most innovative individuals in any field are those who maintain what he calls creative tension between deep domain knowledge and broad, interdisciplinary learning. They're experts who refuse to become prisoners of their own expertise. Consider the career of Pablo Picasso, who revolutionized art multiple times throughout his life. Picasso didn't just master one artistic style and stick with it, he constantly exposed himself to new influences: African art, photography, Cubist mathematics, Surrealist literature. Each new influence transformed his work and opened up creative possibilities that wouldn't have existed within the confines of any single artistic tradition. Contrast this with artists who, after achieving success with a particular style, stop learning and experimenting. They often become trapped in self-repetition, producing variations on themes they mastered years or decades earlier. Their expertise, rather than enabling continued creativity, becomes a limitation that prevents growth and innovation. The cognitive flexibility crisis. When mental agility disappears, creativity requires what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between different mental frameworks, to consider multiple perspectives simultaneously, and to adapt your thinking to changing circumstances. This flexibility is like mental agility. It allows your mind to dance between different possibilities rather than marching rigidly down predetermined paths. Cognitive flexibility depends on several neural systems working together. The prefrontal cortex provides executive control, allowing you to consciously shift attention between different aspects of a problem. The anterior cingulate cortex monitors for conflicts between different mental representations, signaling when it might be time to consider alternative approaches. The hippocampus provides pattern separation, helping you distinguish between similar but distinct situations that might require different solutions. All of these systems are strengthened by continued learning and weakened by cognitive stagnation. When you regularly encounter new information that challenges your existing beliefs and assumptions, these flexibility systems get exercise and become stronger. When you stop learning and stick to familiar routines, they atrophy like unused muscles. The loss of cognitive flexibility has devastating effects on creativity. People become trapped in habitual thinking patterns, unable to consider alternative approaches to problems. They become overly attached to their first ideas, lacking the mental agility to explore other possibilities. They become resistant to feedback and unwilling to revise their approaches when initial attempts fail. Dr. Ellen Langer's research on mindfulness and creativity has shown that people who maintain cognitive flexibility throughout their lives continue to generate creative solutions well into old age. Those who become cognitively rigid often lose their creative abilities decades before any physical decline begins. The associative thinking shutdown, when ideas stop connecting. One of the hallmarks of creative thinking is rich associative processing, the ability to make connections between seemingly unrelated ideas, experiences, and concepts. Creative insights often emerge when your brain suddenly recognizes an unexpected relationship between different pieces of information. This associative thinking depends on what neuroscientists call semantic networks, the web of connections between different concepts in your memory. The richer and more diverse these networks, the more potential associations your brain can make. Learning strengthens these networks by adding new concepts and creating new connections between existing ideas. When learning stops, associative thinking begins to shut down. Your semantic networks stop growing, limiting the raw materials available for creative connection making. Even more problematically, existing connections can weaken from disuse, making it harder to access the associations that are already there. This associative shutdown often happens gradually, making it hard to notice until creativity has significantly declined. People might find themselves having the same ideas repeatedly, struggling to generate alternatives when initial approaches don't work, or feeling like their thinking has become stuck in a rut. Dr. Mark Beeman's research using neuroimaging has shown that creative insights are associated with sudden bursts of activity in the right hemisphere's temporal lobe, reflecting the moment when distant associations suddenly come together. But this process requires rich, well-connected semantic networks to draw from. When these networks become impoverished through lack of learning, insight moments become increasingly rare. The motivation meltdown. When creative drive disappears. Creativity isn't just about cognitive ability, it's also about motivation. Creative work is often difficult, frustrating, and uncertain. It requires persistence through failure, willingness to take risks, and intrinsic motivation to explore possibilities that might not lead anywhere productive. This creative motivation is closely tied to learning and growth. When you're actively acquiring new knowledge and skills, you experience what psychologists call mastery motivation, the intrinsic satisfaction that comes from becoming more competent and capable. This motivation naturally extends to creative exploration, as you become curious about how your new knowledge might be applied in novel ways. But when learning stops, creative motivation often disappears as well. Without the excitement of growth and discovery, creative work can feel pointless or overly difficult. People lose the intrinsic drive to explore, experiment, and push beyond familiar boundaries. Dr. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's research on self-determination theory has identified 3 basic psychological needs that fuel intrinsic motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. All 3 of these needs are supported by continued learning. Autonomy comes from having the knowledge and skills to make independent choices. Competence comes from ongoing growth and mastery. Relatedness comes from sharing learning experiences with others. When learning stops, all three needs become harder to satisfy, leading to what researchers call motivational deflation. People lose not just the ability to be creative, but the desire to be creative. They become content with routine, conventional approaches to life's challenges. The risk aversion spiral. When comfort becomes limitation, creativity inherently involves risk. Creative ideas might fail, creative projects might not work out, and creative expressions might be criticized or rejected. This uncertainty is unavoidable. If you knew in advance that a creative idea would succeed, it probably wouldn't be very creative. Tolerance for this uncertainty and risk is partly a matter of personality, but it's also influenced by your confidence in your ability to learn and adapt. When you're actively learning, you develop what psychologists call learning confidence, the belief that you can acquire new skills, understand new information, and adapt to changing circumstances. This learning confidence makes creative risks feel more manageable. Even if a particular creative project doesn't work out, you trust your ability to learn from the experience and apply those lessons to future endeavors. Failure becomes a learning opportunity rather than a threat to your self-esteem. But when learning stops, risk tolerance often decreases dramatically. Without confidence in your ability to learn and adapt, creative risks feel much more threatening. Failure seems like a permanent judgment rather than a temporary setback. As a result, people become increasingly conservative in their thinking and behavior. This creates what researchers call a risk aversion spiral. As people become less willing to take creative risks, they have fewer opportunities to experience the rewards of creative success. As they experience fewer creative rewards, they become even more risk-averse. Over time, they can become completely trapped in conventional, safe approaches to life's challenges. Dr. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset has shown that people who believe they can learn and improve are much more willing to take creative risks than those who believe their abilities are fixed. Continued learning reinforces growth mindset by providing regular evidence that improvement is possible. The innovation isolation. When creativity becomes purely personal, creativity in the modern world is rarely a solitary endeavor. The most significant innovations typically emerge from collaborative processes where different people contribute different perspectives, skills, and knowledge. This collaborative creativity requires not only individual creative abilities, but also the social skills to work effectively with others who may think very differently. When learning stops, people often become less effective creative collaborators. They become attached to their own ideas and less open to input from others. They lose the cognitive flexibility needed to integrate different perspectives into coherent solutions. They become less interesting creative partners because they bring fewer diverse insights to collaborative processes. This creates what researchers call innovation isolation. As people become less effective creative collaborators, they're excluded from the most exciting creative opportunities, which increasingly require teamwork. As they're excluded from collaborative creativity, they lose access to the diverse perspectives that fuel individual creative thinking. Their creativity becomes increasingly isolated and limited. Dr. Keith Sawyer's research on group creativity has shown that the most innovative teams are those where individual members continue to learn and grow outside the team context. They bring fresh perspectives, new knowledge, and diverse skills to collaborative endeavors. Teams composed of people who have stopped learning tend to get trapped in groupthink and conventional approaches. The cultural creation crisis. When society stops innovating, the creativity catastrophe isn't just an individual problem, it's a cultural crisis that affects entire societies. When large numbers of people stop learning and lose their creative abilities, the overall innovative capacity of communities, organizations, and nations declines. This cultural creativity crisis manifests in several ways. Organizations become more bureaucratic and less innovative. Communities become less able to solve complex problems collaboratively. Entire industries can become trapped in outdated approaches, making them vulnerable to disruption from more creative competitors. History provides sobering examples of what happens when cultures become complacent and stop prioritizing learning and innovation. The Chinese Empire, despite numerous technological advantages, fell behind European powers partly because its educational and cultural systems became rigid and resistant to new ideas. Similarly, many once dominant industries have collapsed when they failed to maintain cultures of learning and innovation. Dr. Richard Florida's research on the creative class has shown that economic prosperity in the modern world increasingly depends on the concentration of creative, learning-oriented individuals in particular regions. Cities and nations that can attract and retain lifelong learners tend to thrive, while those that don't often stagnate economically and culturally. The imagination impoverishment, when future possibilities disappear. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of the creativity catastrophe is its effect on imagination, the human ability to envision possibilities that don't yet exist. Imagination is what allows us to dream of better futures, design solutions to problems we haven't yet encountered, and create meaning and purpose in our lives. Imagination depends on many of the same cognitive systems as creativity: cognitive flexibility, associative thinking, and the ability to combine existing elements in novel ways. When these systems deteriorate due to learning stagnation, imagination suffers alongside creativity. People who stop learning often report that they've lost the ability to envision exciting possibilities for their future. They become trapped in present circumstances, unable to imagine how things might be different or better. This imagination impoverishment can lead to depression, anxiety, and a sense that life lacks meaning and purpose. Dr. Jerome Singer's pioneering research on daydreaming and imagination showed that people with rich imaginations tend to be more creative, more emotionally resilient, and more capable of finding meaning in their experiences. But imagination, like other cognitive abilities, requires regular exercise to maintain its strength. The creative recovery: how learning reignites innovation. The encouraging news is that creativity, like other cognitive abilities, can be recovered through renewed commitment to learning. Research has shown that people who re-engage with learning after periods of stagnation often experience remarkable creative breakthroughs, sometimes exceeding their previous creative capacities. When learning resumes, several positive changes occur in creative thinking systems. Cognitive flexibility returns as neural networks become more active and interconnected. Associative thinking strengthens as new knowledge creates new possibilities for connection making. Risk tolerance increases as learning confidence is restored. Motivation returns as the excitement of growth and discovery is renewed. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on creativity and flow states has shown that people can maintain and even enhance their creative abilities throughout their lives by maintaining what he calls optimal experience, the engaged, challenge state that occurs when learning and creating are balanced with existing skills and abilities. The key is understanding that creativity isn't a talent you either have or don't have. It's a capacity that develops through use and atrophies through neglect. Just as physical fitness can be regained through exercise, creative fitness can be restored through renewed learning and challenge. The innovation imperative: why creativity matters more than ever. In our rapidly changing world, creativity has become more important than ever before. The problems we face, climate change, technological disruption, social inequality, global pandemics, require innovative solutions that go beyond conventional approaches. The jobs of the future will increasingly require creative thinking, adaptability, and the ability to solve novel problems. Yet at the same time, many of the systems and structures in our society seem designed to suppress creativity rather than nurture it. Educational systems emphasize standardized testing over creative exploration. Work environments prioritize efficiency over innovation. Social media algorithms feed us content similar to what we've already seen, reducing exposure to genuinely novel ideas. In this context, maintaining your individual creativity through continued learning becomes not just a personal choice, but a form of resistance against forces that would make you less adaptable, less innovative, and less capable of contributing to positive change. The creative choice: innovation or stagnation. As we conclude this exploration of how learning affects creativity, the choice before you is clear and consequential. You can choose to continue learning, maintaining and developing your creative capacities throughout your life. Or you can choose comfort and routine, allowing your innovative abilities to slowly die through neglect. This choice affects not just your own life satisfaction and success, but your ability to contribute to the creative solutions our world desperately needs. Every creative capacity that dies through learning stagnation is a potential innovation lost, a problem that might have been solved, a possibility that will never be realized. The 5-year-old children in Dr. Land's study who scored at creative genius levels weren't more intelligent than adults. They were simply more willing to explore, experiment, and consider possibilities that conventional thinking would dismiss. That willingness to explore, that openness to possibility, that readiness to combine ideas in unexpected ways, these aren't qualities of childhood that inevitably disappear with age. They're qualities of mind that can be maintained throughout life through continued learning and challenge. Your creativity is not a finite resource that gets used up over time. It's a renewable capacity that grows stronger with use and weaker with neglect. Every new skill you learn, every new domain you explore, every new perspective you encounter becomes fuel for future creative breakthroughs. The choice is yours. Will you keep your creative fire burning bright through lifelong learning, or will you allow it to slowly dim until all that remains are the cold ashes of what once was a vibrant, innovative mind? The world needs your creativity, but first, you need to choose to keep it alive. Chapter 10. The Recovery Blueprint: How Your Brain Heals When Learning Returns. Imagine your brain as a sprawling metropolis that has fallen into disrepair. Roads are cracked, bridges are broken, and entire neighborhoods have been abandoned. Traffic flows poorly, communication is disrupted, and the once vibrant city struggles to function. Now, imagine that a master urban planner arrives with unlimited resources and a revolutionary blueprint for restoration. This is precisely what happens when you reintroduce learning into a brain that has begun to decline. The story of Margaret, a 72-year-old retired teacher, illustrates this transformation beautifully. After 20 years of intellectual retirement, Margaret felt her mind slipping away. Simple conversations became difficult, her memory seemed like a sieve, and she struggled with basic problem-solving tasks that once came naturally. Her family worried she was developing dementia. Then Margaret made a life-changing decision. She enrolled in a beginner's Spanish class at her local community college. What happened next defied everything her family expected. Within 6 months, not only was Margaret conversing in Spanish, but her overall cognitive abilities had dramatically improved. Her memory sharpened, her problem-solving skills returned, and she regained the mental agility that had made her such an effective teacher decades earlier. Margaret's transformation was not miraculous, it was neuroplasticity in action. Research shows that targeted cognitive training, physical activity, and learning interventions can effectively enhance neuroplasticity and promote recovery in patients with cognitive decline. When you resume learning, your brain doesn't just stop declining, it actively begins to rebuild itself. The science behind brain recovery through learning is founded on several key mechanisms. First is the concept of neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells. For decades, scientists believed that adults could not generate new neurons. We now know this is false. The hippocampus, your brain's memory center, continues producing new cells throughout your entire life. However, these new neurons only survive and integrate into your neural networks if they are stimulated through novel experiences and learning challenges. Think of neurogenesis like planting seeds in a garden. The seeds represent new neurons, but without water, sunlight, and nutrients, the equivalent of intellectual stimulation, they will not grow into mature plants. Learning provides this essential nourishment, ensuring that new brain cells not only survive but flourish and contribute to your cognitive abilities. The second mechanism is synaptic plasticity, your brain's ability to strengthen or weaken the connections between neurons based on use. When you stop learning, these connections weaken and may eventually disappear. But when learning resumes, your brain rapidly begins reinforcing these pathways while creating entirely new ones. Technology-enhanced interventions, including virtual reality and augmented reality therapies, have revolutionized neurorehabilitation by creating immersive and engaging environments that stimulate neuroplasticity. Consider the analogy of muscle memory in athletics. A professional pianist who hasn't played for years can return to the instrument and, with practice, regain their former skill level much faster than it took to develop initially. This happens because the neural pathways for piano playing, though weakened, still exist. Learning reactivates and strengthens these dormant connections while building new ones to enhance performance beyond previous levels. The third mechanism involves the brain's white matter, the network of nerve fibers that connects different brain regions. Chronic lack of learning causes white matter integrity to deteriorate, like roads falling into disrepair from lack of maintenance. When learning resumes, your brain begins rebuilding these connections, improving communication between different brain areas and enhancing overall cognitive function. The recovery process follows a predictable timeline, though individual variations exist. In the first few days of renewed learning, your brain begins increasing production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, a protein that acts like fertilizer for brain cells. BDNF promotes the growth of new neurons and synapses while protecting existing brain cells from damage. Within the first week, you may notice improvements in attention and concentration. Your brain is essentially coming out of hibernation, reactivating neural networks that had been running at minimal capacity. Many people describe this as feeling like mental fog is lifting. By the second week, memory improvements typically become apparent. The hippocampus, refreshed by new learning experiences, begins encoding and retrieving information more efficiently. You might find yourself remembering names, dates, and details that previously eluded you. After 1 month of consistent learning, structural changes in your brain become measurable through neuroimaging. The thickness of your cerebral cortex begins increasing, new neural pathways form, and existing ones strengthen significantly. This is when many people report feeling mentally sharper than they have in years. 3 months of sustained learning triggers even more dramatic changes. Your brain's default mode network, the system active when you're not focused on specific tasks, becomes more efficient. This improvement enhances creativity, self-awareness, and the ability to make connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. The type of learning you choose influences which brain systems recover first and most dramatically. Language learning, like Margaret's Spanish classes, provides comprehensive cognitive rehabilitation because it engages multiple brain systems simultaneously: memory, attention, auditory processing, motor control for speech, and executive function for grammar rules. Musical instrument training offers another powerful recovery pathway. Learning to play an instrument requires your brain to coordinate auditory, visual, and motor systems while processing complex patterns and timing. Activities that provide both cognitive challenges and social connection, such as music or sports like pickleball that combine physical activity, strategy, and social interaction, are particularly effective. Mathematical learning targets different recovery pathways, strengthening logical reasoning, pattern recognition, and working memory systems. Even basic arithmetic exercises can provide significant cognitive benefits for brains recovering from learning stagnation. Art and creative pursuits engage the brain's visual processing systems while promoting emotional regulation and stress reduction. Drawing, painting, or sculpting requires fine motor control, spatial reasoning, and creative problem-solving, a powerful combination for cognitive recovery. Physical exercise combined with learning creates synergistic effects that accelerate brain recovery. Several studies have supported a connection between physical activity and brain health. When you learn a new physical skill, dancing, martial arts, or complex exercise routines, you engage both your brain and body in ways that maximize neuroplasticity. The social component of learning cannot be underestimated in the recovery process. Learning in group settings provides additional benefits beyond individual study. Social interaction stimulates the production of oxytocin and other neurochemicals that promote brain health while providing emotional support that sustains motivation during challenging periods. However, recovery is not without its challenges. Many people experience what researchers call cognitive load overwhelm when they first return to learning. Years of mental stagnation mean your brain has lost some of its processing capacity. Initially, even simple learning tasks may feel exhausting or frustrating. This is normal and temporary. Like an athlete returning to training after a long break, your brain needs time to rebuild its stamina. Starting with short, manageable learning sessions and gradually increasing duration and complexity prevents discouragement and promotes sustainable recovery. Another common challenge is perfectionism paralysis. People who once excelled academically or professionally may feel frustrated by their initial slow progress when returning to learning. Remember that your brain is rebuilding itself from a compromised state. Progress may seem slow initially, but the underlying changes are profound and accelerating. The recovery process also requires patience with memory consolidation. Your brain needs time to process and integrate new information, particularly during sleep. Many people report that material that seemed difficult during learning sessions becomes clearer after a good night's rest. This is your brain's natural consolidation process working to strengthen newly formed memories and skills. Perhaps most encouraging is research showing that cognitive recovery through learning can exceed your brain's previous baseline function. Studies suggest that intellectually engaging activities may be protective when started later in life, with lifetime intellectual enrichment providing cumulative benefits. The brain that emerges from a structured recovery program is often more resilient, flexible, and capable than before the period of decline. This improvement occurs because learning challenges force your brain to develop more efficient processing strategies and backup systems. Like a city that rebuilds stronger infrastructure after destruction, your recovered brain often functions better than its pre-decline state. The key to successful cognitive recovery is understanding that your brain wants to learn and grow. Every human brain, regardless of age or previous neglect, retains the capacity for improvement through neuroplasticity. The challenge is not whether recovery is possible, it is, but rather having the courage and persistence to begin the journey back to cognitive vitality. Chapter 11. The Learning Prescription, Evidence-Based Methods to Reverse Cognitive Decline. Dr. Michael Chen, a leading neuroscientist at Stanford University, often tells the story of his own cognitive awakening. At age 52, despite his expertise in brain research, Dr. Chen found himself struggling with the very problems he studied in his patients. His memory wasn't as sharp, his problem-solving abilities had dulled, and he felt mentally sluggish despite his extensive knowledge about brain health. The irony was not lost on him. Here was a man who understood the neuroscience of learning better than almost anyone, yet he had fallen into the same trap as millions of others. He had stopped actively challenging his brain. His research consumed his intellectual energy, but it was narrow and routine. He hadn't truly learned something new in years. Dr. Chen decided to become his own test subject. Using evidence-based methods from his own research and that of his colleagues worldwide, he designed a comprehensive learning prescription for himself. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, not only had his cognitive abilities returned to their previous levels, but they had improved beyond what he had experienced even in his 30s. This personal transformation led Dr. Chen to develop what is now known as the Learning Prescription Protocol, a systematic, evidence-based approach to reversing cognitive decline through targeted learning interventions. His protocol, now used in research institutions worldwide, provides a roadmap for anyone seeking to restore and enhance their cognitive abilities. The Learning Prescription Protocol is built on 5 foundational principles, each supported by extensive neuroscientific research. These principles work synergistically to maximize neuroplasticity and accelerate cognitive recovery. Principle 1. Cognitive load progression. The first principle recognizes that a brain recovering from learning stagnation cannot immediately handle the same cognitive challenges it once managed easily. Like physical rehabilitation after injury, cognitive recovery requires careful progression from simple to complex tasks. The protocol begins with what researchers call low-load, high-frequency activities. These are simple learning tasks performed regularly to reactivate dormant neural pathways without overwhelming processing capacity. Examples include basic vocabulary acquisition in a new language, simple mathematical exercises, or elementary puzzle solving. Research shows that the brain responds better to frequent, brief learning sessions than to intensive, infrequent ones. A person recovering from cognitive decline should aim for 15 to 20-minute learning sessions, 3 to 4 times daily, rather than 1 or 2 lengthy study periods. This approach prevents cognitive fatigue while maximizing the neuroplastic benefits of spaced learning. As cognitive stamina improves, typically after 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice, the protocol increases both the complexity and duration of learning tasks. This progression might involve moving from basic vocabulary to conversational language practice, from simple arithmetic to algebraic problem solving, or from basic puzzles to complex strategy games. Principle 2. Multi-domain integration. The second principle leverages the brain's interconnected nature by engaging multiple cognitive domains simultaneously. Rather than focusing on isolated skills, effective cognitive rehabilitation challenges different brain systems in coordinated ways. Language learning exemplifies this principle perfectly. When you learn a new language, you simultaneously engage auditory processing, listening to pronunciation, visual processing, reading new scripts, motor control, speaking and writing, memory systems, vocabulary retention, and executive function, grammar rules and sentence construction. This multi-domain activation creates what researchers call cognitive spillover effects, where improvements in one area enhance performance in seemingly unrelated domains. Musical training provides another powerful example of multi-domain integration. Playing an instrument requires precise timing, temporal processing, pattern recognition, musical structures, fine motor control, finger movements, auditory discrimination, pitch and rhythm, reading skills, musical notation, and working memory, holding musical phrases in mind while playing. Learning a new skill like playing an instrument effectively stimulates portions of your brain that result in lasting cognitive increases. The protocol specifically recommends combining at least 2 different types of learning activities. For example, someone might pair language learning with musical training, or mathematical study with artistic pursuits. This combination ensures that recovery engages the brain's full range of capabilities rather than focusing on narrow skill sets. Principle 3. Progressive novelty. The third principle addresses the brain's tendency to automate familiar activities. Once you master a learning task, your brain begins processing it more efficiently, requiring less conscious attention and effort. While this automation is useful for daily functioning, it provides diminishing cognitive benefits for recovery purposes. Progressive novelty means continuously introducing new challenges as previous ones become routine. A person learning Spanish, for example, shouldn't simply repeat the same vocabulary exercises indefinitely. Instead, they should progress from basic vocabulary to conversations, then to literature, then to technical or specialized topics that maintain cognitive challenge. This principle explains why many people plateau in their cognitive recovery efforts. They find learning activities they enjoy and can manage successfully, but they fail to increase the difficulty level as their abilities improve. Without progressive challenge, the brain stops generating new neural pathways and returns to maintenance mode. The protocol includes specific guidelines for recognizing when to increase challenge levels. Generally, when a learning task becomes comfortable and automatic, when you can perform it without significant mental effort, it's time to add complexity or move to more advanced material. Principle 4. Embodied learning. The fourth principle recognizes the crucial connection between physical movement and cognitive function. Traditional educational models often treat the mind and body as separate systems, but neuroscience reveals their intimate interconnection. Physical movement, particularly when combined with learning, dramatically enhances neuroplasticity and accelerates cognitive recovery. Physical activities such as exercising regularly, stimulating your brain with activities like reading, playing music, learning a new language, combined with eating a balanced diet can help rewire your brain and boost cognitive function. The protocol incorporates movement-based learning whenever possible. Learning a new dance style, for example, challenges spatial reasoning, memory, rhythm processing, and social cognition while providing cardiovascular exercise. Martial arts combine physical conditioning with complex movement patterns, strategic thinking, and mindfulness practices. Even simple activities like taking walks while listening to educational podcasts or audiobooks can enhance learning effectiveness. The brain benefits from this integration because movement increases blood flow to cognitive centers while stimulating the production of growth factors that promote neuroplasticity. Additionally, the motor cortex, responsible for movement control, has extensive connections with areas involved in thinking, memory, and decision-making. Principle 5. Social cognitive engagement. The fifth principle acknowledges that humans are inherently social creatures, and our brains evolved to function optimally in social contexts. Isolated learning, while sometimes necessary, cannot fully replace the cognitive benefits of social interaction during the learning process. Group learning environments provide several unique advantages for cognitive recovery. First, social interaction requires real-time processing of complex verbal and nonverbal information, challenging multiple cognitive systems simultaneously. Second, explaining concepts to others or engaging in educational discussions strengthens your own understanding through what educators call elaborative processing. Third, social learning environments provide emotional support and motivation that sustain long-term recovery efforts. The accountability and encouragement of learning partners can be crucial during challenging periods when individual motivation might falter. The protocol recommends incorporating social elements into at least half of all learning activities. This might involve joining study groups, participating in conversation clubs for language learning, taking group classes for new skills, or finding learning partners for mutual accountability and support. Implementation strategies. Implementing the learning prescription protocol requires careful attention to several practical considerations. First is the timing of learning sessions. Research shows that cognitive performance varies throughout the day based on individual circadian rhythms. Most people experience peak cognitive performance in the morning hours, making this the optimal time for challenging new material. However, different types of learning may benefit from different timing. Creative activities often perform better in the evening when logical, analytical thinking is less dominant. Physical learning activities should be scheduled when energy levels are high and the risk of injury is low. Second is the environment for learning. The brain forms strong associations between learning contexts and the material being learned. Varying learning environments, studying in different rooms, outdoor locations, or even different seating arrangements, can strengthen memory consolidation and improve recall abilities. Third is the importance of sleep in the recovery process. Getting enough sleep is by far the most important factor in encouraging a healthy brain prone to neuroplasticity. The brain consolidates new learning during sleep, particularly during deep sleep phases. People following the protocol should prioritize 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep nightly and avoid learning intensive material within 2 hours of bedtime. Monitoring progress. The protocol includes specific methods for tracking cognitive recovery progress. Unlike physical rehabilitation, where improvements are often visually apparent, cognitive changes can be subtle and gradual. Systematic monitoring helps maintain motivation and allows for protocol adjustments when necessary. Cognitive assessment tools, ranging from simple memory tests to complex problem-solving challenges, provide objective measures of improvement. Many of these assessments are available online and can be performed weekly or monthly to track progress over time. Subjective measures are equally important. People following the protocol should maintain learning journals, noting improvements in daily cognitive tasks, increased mental energy, enhanced memory, or better problem-solving abilities in real-world situations. Perhaps most importantly, the protocol emphasizes that cognitive recovery is not a destination but a journey. The goal is not to reach a particular level of cognitive function and then stop, but to establish learning as a permanent lifestyle component that continues providing cognitive benefits throughout life. The learning prescription protocol has now been tested with thousands of individuals worldwide, from young adults seeking cognitive enhancement to older adults recovering from years of mental stagnation. The results consistently demonstrate that structured, evidence-based learning interventions can not only halt cognitive decline but reverse it, often leading to cognitive abilities that exceed previous baseline levels. Dr. Chen's own transformation from cognitively stagnant researcher to mentally agile scientist exemplifies the protocol's potential. His story reminds us that understanding the science of learning is only the first step. Applying that knowledge consistently and systematically is what creates lasting cognitive change. Blank, blank. Chapter 13. The Lifelong Learning Revolution, Building a Brain That Never Stops Growing. In a small village in northern Italy, 89-year-old Giuseppe Toretti sits at his computer, carefully crafting his latest blog post about quantum physics. His weathered fingers move deliberately across the keyboard as he translates complex scientific concepts into accessible language for his online audience of over 50,000 readers worldwide. Giuseppe's story would be remarkable enough if he were simply an elderly man maintaining his cognitive abilities. But Giuseppe's true story is far more extraordinary. He didn't begin studying physics until age 75. He learned to use computers at 82. He started his blog at 85. Now, 4 years later, he's not just maintaining his mental faculties, he's expanding them into territories he never explored during his long career as a village baker. Giuseppe represents a growing movement of individuals who have discovered the secret to cognitive longevity, the principle of lifelong learning. These are people who have rejected the cultural myth that learning is primarily for the young and embraced the scientific reality that the human brain remains capable of growth, change, and improvement throughout the entire lifespan. The lifelong learning revolution is more than just an educational trend. It's a fundamental reimagining of how we think about aging, intelligence, and human potential. Lifelong learning opportunities help fight cognitive decline through increasing mental stimulation and social interaction, while building up cognitive reserves and increasing the chances of staving off cognitive decline. This movement is supported by decades of neuroscientific research showing that the brain's capacity for plasticity doesn't diminish with age, it simply changes form. Understanding the neuroscience of lifelong learning begins with recognizing how the aging brain differs from the young brain, not in capacity, but in strategy. Young brains are like powerful sports cars, fast, responsive, and capable of rapid acceleration. They process information quickly and can switch between tasks with impressive speed. However, young brains are also relatively inefficient, using more neural resources than necessary and often getting distracted by irrelevant information. Mature brains, by contrast, operate more like luxury sedans, perhaps not as quick off the line, but more efficient, stable, and capable of sustained high performance. Research shows that older brains that continue learning develop superior pattern recognition abilities, better emotional regulation, and enhanced wisdom, the ability to apply knowledge and experience to complex life situations. The key difference lies not in raw processing speed but in neural efficiency and strategy. Young brains rely heavily on the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for working memory and rapid decision-making. Mature brains that continue learning develop what researchers call bilateral processing. They engage both hemispheres of the brain more equally, creating redundant processing pathways that actually enhance overall cognitive performance. This bilateral processing explains why many people report that learning becomes more enjoyable and meaningful as they age. The mature brain integrates new information with vast stores of existing knowledge, creating rich connections and deep understanding that younger learners often lack. The lifelong learning revolution challenges several persistent myths about aging and cognition. The first myth is that intelligence peaks in youth and inevitably declines with age. While certain types of cognitive processing, particularly those requiring rapid information processing, may slow with age, other types of intelligence actually improve throughout the lifespan. Crystallized intelligence, the accumulated knowledge, skills, and expertise gained through experience, continues growing well into the 80s and beyond for individuals who remain intellectually active. Wisdom, creativity, and the ability to see complex patterns and relationships often peak in later decades of life. The second myth is that older brains cannot form new memories as effectively as young brains. While the hippocampus, the brain's primary memory center, does show age-related changes, research demonstrates that continued learning actually protects and strengthens memory systems. Older adults who engage in regular learning activities often perform better on memory tests than younger adults who have stopped challenging themselves intellectually. The third myth is that creativity declines with age. Studies of artists, writers, scientists, and other creative professionals show that many produce their most innovative and meaningful work in their later decades. The mature brain's ability to integrate diverse knowledge domains and think in nonlinear ways often leads to breakthrough insights that elude younger minds focused on narrow specializations. Building a brain that never stops growing requires understanding the specific strategies that optimize lifelong learning. These strategies differ somewhat from approaches that work best for young learners, taking advantage of the mature brain's unique strengths while compensating for areas where processing might be slower. Strategy 1. Depth over breadth. Young learners often benefit from exposure to many different subjects and ideas, building a broad foundation of knowledge. Mature learners, however, often find greater satisfaction and cognitive benefit from deep exploration of subjects that genuinely interest them. This depth-focused approach leverages the mature brain's superior pattern recognition abilities and vast stores of background knowledge. When Giuseppe began studying quantum physics, he wasn't starting from scratch. He was building on decades of experience with precision, problem-solving, and analytical thinking developed through his baking career. His mature brain could make connections between seemingly unrelated domains that a younger physics student might miss. Deep learning also provides greater motivation for sustained effort. Mature learners have developed clearer preferences and interests. By focusing on subjects that genuinely fascinate them, they're more likely to maintain the consistent practice necessary for cognitive benefit. Strategy 2. Integration and application. The mature brain excels at synthesis, combining information from multiple sources to create new understanding or solve complex problems. Effective lifelong learning strategies emphasize connecting new knowledge with existing experience and finding practical applications for learning. This might involve relating historical events to current political situations, applying mathematical concepts to personal financial planning, or using language learning to better understand cultural differences. The mature brain's strength lies not in memorizing isolated facts but in building rich, interconnected knowledge networks. Strategy 3. Social and collaborative learning. Activities such as reading, creating art, dancing, playing board games, and learning new skills contribute to reduced risks of cognitive decline and dementia. While young learners often excel at individual study, mature learners frequently benefit more from social and collaborative learning environments. This preference reflects both the mature brain's enhanced social cognition abilities and the motivational benefits of peer interaction. Learning communities provide accountability, support, and the opportunity to teach others, which research shows is one of the most effective ways to consolidate new knowledge. Many successful lifelong learners join book clubs, discussion groups, hobby organizations, or volunteer teaching opportunities. These social contexts make learning more enjoyable while providing the interpersonal stimulation that keeps the brain engaged and motivated. Strategy 4. Technology integration. One of the most significant developments in lifelong learning is the integration of technology to overcome traditional barriers to education. Giuseppe's ability to share his physics insights with a global audience through blogging exemplifies how technology can transform mature learners from passive consumers to active contributors of knowledge. Online learning platforms, virtual reality experiences, smartphone apps, and other digital tools provide unprecedented access to learning opportunities while accommodating the scheduling and mobility constraints that sometimes affect older adults. More importantly, learning to use new technologies provides its own cognitive benefits, challenging the brain to adapt to new interfaces and ways of processing information. Strategy 5. Physical integration. The lifelong learning revolution increasingly recognizes that cognitive and physical health are inseparably linked. Effective learning strategies for mature adults often incorporate physical activity, whether through movement-based learning activities, outdoor education experiences, or simply ensuring that sedentary learning is balanced with regular exercise. Research shows that physical activity increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, promotes neurogenesis, and enhances memory consolidation. Many lifelong learners report that their best insights and creative breakthroughs occur during walks, workouts, or other physical activities. The broader implications of the lifelong learning revolution extend far beyond individual cognitive health. Societies that embrace and support lifelong learning are discovering significant economic, social, and cultural benefits. Economically, lifelong learners remain productive and engaged longer, reducing healthcare costs while contributing knowledge, skills, and innovation. Many of today's most successful entrepreneurs, artists, and thought leaders are individuals who reinvented themselves through learning in their later decades. Socially, lifelong learning helps bridge generational divides by creating shared experiences and common ground between different age groups. When grandparents and grandchildren learn new technologies together, or when young professionals learn traditional crafts from older experts, these interactions strengthen social cohesion and mutual understanding. Culturally, the lifelong learning revolution is changing how we think about life stages and human potential. Rather than viewing life as a series of distinct phases, education, career, retirement, we're beginning to see life as a continuous journey of growth and discovery. This shift has profound implications for how we structure education systems, workplace policies, and social institutions. Progressive organizations are beginning to recognize that supporting lifelong learning for employees of all ages creates more innovative, adaptable, and engaged workforces. Educational institutions are expanding programs specifically designed for mature learners, recognizing that this population brings unique perspectives, life experience, and learning styles that enrich the educational environment for learners of all ages. The personal rewards of embracing lifelong learning extend far beyond cognitive protection. People like Giuseppe report that continued learning provides a sense of purpose, identity, and engagement that transforms their later years from a period of decline into a time of growth and contribution. This transformation occurs because learning is fundamentally about hope, the belief that tomorrow can be different from today, that new possibilities exist, and that growth remains possible regardless of age or circumstances. When people stop learning, they often stop hoping. When they resume learning, they rediscover not just their cognitive abilities but their sense of agency and potential. The lifelong learning revolution represents perhaps the most important shift in how we understand human development and aging. It's a movement based on scientific evidence, supported by technological innovation, and driven by individuals who refuse to accept cognitive decline as inevitable. Giuseppe Toretti, typing away at his computer in his Italian village, represents millions of people worldwide who have discovered that the human brain's greatest years may lie not in youth but in the decades when wisdom, experience, and continued curiosity combine to create unprecedented possibilities for growth and contribution. The revolution is just beginning, and its ultimate impact may be to fundamentally transform what it means to age successfully in the modern world. Conclusion: the choice that changes everything. As we reach the end of our journey through the hidden science of what happens when learning stops, you now possess knowledge that most people will never discover. You understand that your brain is not a static organ slowly deteriorating with age, but a dynamic, plastic system capable of growth, recovery, and enhancement throughout your entire life. You've learned that the choice between learning and stagnation is not merely about acquiring new skills or staying intellectually current. It's about choosing between two fundamentally different life trajectories. One leads to gradual cognitive decline, emotional numbness, social isolation, and an accelerated aging process that affects every aspect of your existence. The other leads to continued growth, enhanced resilience, deeper relationships, and a quality of life that many people never imagined possible. The scientific evidence is overwhelming and unequivocal. Use it or lose it is not just a clever saying but a fundamental law of neuroscience. Every day that you choose routine over challenge, comfort over curiosity, you are making a decision about your brain's future. Every day that you choose learning over stagnation, growth over maintenance, you are literally reshaping your neural architecture and expanding your human potential. But knowledge without action is merely intellectual entertainment. The question now is not whether you understand the importance of lifelong learning, you do. The question is what you will do with this understanding. Tomorrow morning, You will wake up and face the same choice that confronts every human being. Will you seek out something new to learn, some challenge to embrace, some boundary to expand? Or will you default to the familiar patterns that feel comfortable but slowly erode your cognitive abilities? The beautiful truth about neuroplasticity is that it's never too late to begin. Whether you're 25 or 85, whether your brain has been stagnant for months or decades, the capacity for recovery and growth remains. Your brain is waiting, ready to respond to the challenge of learning with renewed vigor and capability. The choice you make about learning today will echo through every tomorrow you have left. Choose wisely, choose growth, choose the path that leads not just to a longer life, but to a life worth living fully until the very end. Your brain is waiting. The only question is, what will you teach it today?